Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Pro Training Technical webinar, Zone Out, Not Mosquitoes Out. Today we have Dr. Jamel Sandidge, National Technical Director for Nisus, presenting. Before we start, I'd like to review a few items to help you participate in today's event. The GoToWebinar platform that we use has a new look, but it's still easy to navigate. Note that you have joined this webinar in listen-only mode, which means you are muted. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions by tapping the question icon at the top of the screen and typing them in. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will address them. Please note that we may not be able to answer all questions due to time constraints, but we will do our best to cover as many as possible. Additionally, you can download the resource documents provided by our presenter at any time during the webinar by accessing the materials icon at the top of the screen. Later today, you will receive a follow-up email containing the recording of this webinar for your reference. With that, let me introduce you to today's speaker. Dr. Jamel Sandidge has been involved in multiple levels of the pest management industry for the last 25 years. As a research entomologist and R&D manager, he was responsible for driving the development and growth of new and existing products, efficacy testing, and technical assistance. He is now the National Director of Technical Services for Nisus Corporation, where he supports the industry through education, training, and technical support. Jamel is a board-certified entomologist with a master's degree in entomology and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Kansas. While attending graduate school, he launched a pest management business starting from the ground up. He owned and operated BRS Pest Control and Consulting for 9 years, gaining practical experience in the field solving complex pest management issues. Jamel, the floor is yours.
All right. So thanks to everybody who's come to listen today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mosquito management and kind of integrated mosquito management and how products like Zone Out fit into there. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about the differences between kind of synthetic materials that we might use and most of the 25Bs, and some of the things like longevity expectations, some of those things that are a little bit different. So let's go ahead and get started here. And I really love to talk about this, first off, because as pest control professionals, sometimes we don't think about how important our job is. And really, we're talking about, this is a system of preventive and corrective measures to reduce pests from causing significant harm to the humans, to humans or the environment. You can include animals and other things in there too, but that's really, what do we do every day? And, when people ask me what I do, some people might say, well, I'm a bug killer, and I'm a bug man, but I say, I save lives. That's what I do every day, because we are actually protectors of human health and safety. And this is what we're going to talk about today, because there are a lot of diseases and things that are spread by mosquitoes that we don't see anymore, or we've had large outbreaks of things like Zika, and all of a sudden it's gone. But what happened? What happened is you out there, you're the ones who picked up that phone call and got out there and started treating for mosquitoes, started knocking down the threat, and helped to save human health and safety. So we're protectors of animal health. We're protectors against property damage. We're protectors against food safety when we're killing cockroaches and mice and flies in restaurants. We're protectors against zoonotic diseases. Every rodent that we kill is another one that doesn't spread hantavirus or some other disease that has no cure. And we are, again, protectors against vector-borne diseases, which is our big topic of today. So I always say that, you should feel like a superhero every day, because, Your job is so important to the infrastructure of the United States and also to your communities, so keeping your communities safe and aware of issues that are surrounding them. So, a big thank you to everybody out there for doing your job every day. Sometimes we really don't get that pat on the back that we need, and we are extremely important, and don't ever forget that. So mosquitoes, what are they? The big thing that most people don't really remember about mosquitoes is that they can actually be pollinators through nectar feeding. And that mosquitoes, when their initial stages of development actually feed on nectar and sugars from flowers and plants. So that's one thing that is very important when we look at where the mosquitoes going to be. How do we target the mosquitoes? How do we eliminate the mosquitoes? But they also serve as food for a lot of different things, for bats, birds, fish, other things. But there are most of these species that are out there, they transmit some kind of disease. They can be things as serious as malaria and dengue, all the way to West Nile, yellow fever, Zika, other things that we've had pop up in different populations across the US. But all of a sudden, the mosquito population gets annihilated by, again, you out there, and those threats go away. So pathogens that are transmitted via those blood meals. So, we know that when we look at the deadliest organisms on Earth, mosquitoes are at the top of that list. So it makes this topic so much more important than others, even because of that threat. Now, the key factors in control, I'm going to really talk about like how mosquitoes do things, how they find people, how and how we can intercept their behavior. Because with every organism that we face, every insect, every rodent, we're using their biology and behavior against them. And in this case, we have our host seeking activity. They're looking for CO2. They have a lot of olfactory sensors on their bodies. They're looking for body heat, and they're also looking for, visual cues. So they see that dark outline of a shape moving around, and they're going towards that shape. Then they see if it smells right, if it has CO2 coming out of it, if it's warm, then they will try to bite. So humans are producing CO2 and pheromones all the time, things like lactic acid, ammonia, carboxylic acid, all of which have been shown that mosquitoes are able to detect and go towards those individuals. But mosquito flight is just really odd sometimes, because mosquitoes don't generally have, well, most the species that we deal with most, the 80 species, they don't really have exceptionally long flights. So they do bush hopping. So they may come into an environment, they may land on a plant, they may travel a little farther, land on a plant, get closer and closer to where this source is coming from. They keep on coming closer, and then they finally land on, a person, find bare skin, and bite them. So this activity right here, this landing on different things before you get to the target, is really what we're focusing on with mosquito control. So mosquito life cycles are, I'm not gonna, most people out there already know most of this, but a lot of this is going to be, again, how do we use the biology? How do we use the behavior to kill the species? So we go from an adult that lays an egg, so they lay them mostly either singly or on rafts of 20, 40, of eggs. And within 1 to 3 days, those eggs are going to hatch and develop into small larvae. Those larvae are going to go through 4 instars, and they're going to be, in feeding on bacteria and organic material in the water. And I'll talk about the specifics of some of the water a little bit later as well. But then they're going to spend anywhere from 4 to 14 days in that larval stage, developing, feeding before they become adults. They pupate and become adults. So very important to think about these life cycles when we're doing our applications, because what are the service intervals in heavy mosquito habitats? That's it, very, very important. So if you look at these life cycles, we're talking about anywhere from 7 to 14 to 20 days for egg to development of the adult mosquitoes. So when we're timing service intervals at a location, it's important to think about, if it's a heavy infestation, you want to think about that 10 to 14 day cycle, or that 14 to 20 day cycle, depending on which species you're after. So the key components to mosquito management programs are going to be, regular surveillance. And this is going to be monitoring things. So we want to know when the mosquitoes are going to start hatching. We want to know when the adults that overwintered are going to start mating, or when the eggs that are overwintering are going to start hatching. And so we're looking at things like weather. We're looking at when those first rains come, the significant rains that are going to create some of these kind of ephemeral pools that a lot of the 80 species are using to reproduce. So we want to look at habitat manipulation and source reduction. So we're finding where they're breeding, and we're eliminating those sources. We want to have targeted larvicide and adulticide use. And then the biggest part of this is actually public education, because knowing what mosquitoes do, where they breed, is very, very important. And I got in a quick story here, I bought a house in Knoxville, about 9 years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago. And when I came to do the inspection of the house and visit the house, there was a wheelbarrow full of wood and water and thousands and thousands of mosquito larvae. And this is just one house in this neighborhood that has probably had been producing thousands and thousands of mosquitoes. So one house can ruin an entire neighborhood, because they're going to disperse from there and cause problems. Later on, after I moved into the house, I actually found a pond in the corner that had stagnant water sitting in there, and again, hundreds of thousands of mosquito larvae. So it was I didn't know it was there. No one ever mentioned it. It was so overgrown with weeds. I actually heard a frog one day, and I was like, why would there be a frog here? And I heard a splash, looked in between all the weeds, and said, oh my God, there's a pond there. So difficult things like that, looking for clues, if you have a heavy mosquito infestation in an area, you may have to knock on a few other doors and ask some questions, to alleviate the pressure for the entire neighborhood. So the good thing about mosquitoes is that they're confined to aquatic habitats during early stages of their development. So it's easy to kind of target them in that stage before they become adults. And once they become adults, they don't often go very far right away. They'll stick within that area for a little while before they start dispersing. So one of the big things is beginning to do things with larvicides, beginning to treat areas that are prone to flooding. So I'll talk about that a little bit more too. But they do rest in close proximity before they disperse. And another good thing for us is that mosquitoes are slow, weak flyers. Slow, weak flyers. So that means that they are hiding in vegetation. They're doing that island hopping that I said before, and they avoid wind, and they also don't like excessive heat. So on days with a lot of heat, you don't see a lot of pressure from mosquitoes till nighttime, when they come out deep from in the bushes to find their prey. And so the males emerge first. This is very important also. If you see a lot of male mosquitoes, but you're not really seeing female mosquitoes, you know that 2 or 3 days maybe later, you're going to have those female mosquitoes hatching. So sometimes it's even better to, wait on that treatment if you only see male mosquitoes, and come back in 2 or 3 days, so that you can target those females directly, as well as treating the areas that they may go to. So talking about zone out is our new 25B mosquito management product. And zone out is part of an integrated mosquito management practice. And zone out's a 25B minimum risk for mosquitoes and fleas. and it is a blend of 8 essential oils that give, rapid knockdown and kill. And I can mention right here, one of the things that is not really expressed or well known out there is a lot of mosquitoes, they don't die right away when they contact a pesticide. They don't just drop to the ground. So sometimes when we use synthetic chemicals, that mosquito still has time to find individuals and bite them before they start feeling all of the effects, especially if they hop to a bush, someone walks by that bush and they fly out immediately and bite them. So we're not dropping mosquitoes immediately on a lot of things, but adding things like a 25B to the mix can add that essential element of immediate knockdown. And then, they're going to die over a short period of time after that. So Zone Out kills and repels mosquitoes and fleas, and it's packaged in, you see here on the assembly line there, it's in a 1 gallon tip and pour or tip and measure containers. Now, a little bit about synthetics versus botanicals. So 25B is a category that, I know and love and have used 25B products. When I started my business in 2001, I was using 25B products, almost exclusively for mosquito treatments and other things. So I have a long history of both in the development of those pesticides and in the use of the pesticides. So these are categories that EPA does not regulate the actual product, so it's not registered through EPA, but EPA does have a lot of sets of rules that have to apply to these pesticides. So while they are, not federally registered, each state has their own ability to register or internally regulate that particular product. There are some states that have very strict requirements for 25B and they need a ton of data and information. And there are others that say, we don't care. We'll just you pay us the money and we'll register it. So the other thing that's very, very important about 25B products, and you hear this all the time, and you hear like, how do we make it last longer? How do we make it last longer? But the principle of the entire product is so that it doesn't last in the environment and it doesn't have any lingering effects of any, it doesn't have any bioaccumulation or any of that. So it's not intended to last a significant amount of time in the environment. It's meant to kill what's there, repel it for several weeks, and then do a reapplication to continue the process. So the reapplication intervals for 25B products have to be shorter than your standard, if you're doing bifenthrin or if you're doing, demand CS or onslaught or any of those, the service intervals need to be shorter in order to accommodate this safer 25B category. And this is something that, it's a key thing for people because oftentimes we want to fit the round peg into the square hole and just go, well, I was using synthetics and I do it every 60 days. So I'm going to do 25B every 60 days. Well, that's not how it works. 25B products need to be applied in 21 to 28 day cycles. And if you remember from our initial mosquito slides, we're anywhere from 14 to that 20, 21 days. That's our cycle for mosquitoes in that population anyway. So you would want to be there within that 21 to 28 days. So all of these contain essential oils, food grade acids, other oils, sometimes edible oils, like grapeseed oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, and other ingredients that are deemed to be safe. And all of these ingredients are listed on EPA, and you cannot use anything other than the very, very specific list that EPA provides, which is, a tragedy in sometimes because there are things like there are some essential oils like eucalyptus that work great on mosquitoes, but it's not on the list. So you can't use it unless it is a registered pesticide, even though it could still be a more, natural, safer compound.
Jamel,
Um,
there is a question that has come in
okay.
asking, how can I get this product in Nigeria? Is it
Unfortunately, we don't
available?
sell this product in Nigeria right now, but yeah,
Okay.
we're not selling it in Nigeria right now, but there are some 25B products that probably are sold there. So everything I'm saying today is going to kind of apply to a lot of different 25B pesticides. But I'm just trying to, kind of give you the information on how these pesticides work and how they function, and their usages. So talking about synthetic insecticides and mixing synthetic insecticides with 25B. Now, number one, why would you want to do that? I talked earlier about the knockdown. So we have products that are, good mosquito products like bifenthrin, but bifenthrin does not have a good knockdown on mosquitoes. And it also doesn't do a couple of other things. And they are not active in the vapor phase. So none of those synthetics are active in the vapor phase. And that really means that the vapors from that product are keeping mosquitoes away from that area. So that is a very, very different thing to kind of think about. So there are 5 different types of repellents. We have spatial repellents, we have contact irritants, excito-repellents, odor masking, confusants, visual masking, and then we have anti-feeding or deterrents. And when we talk about synthetic pyrethroids are none of those. So synthetic pyrethroid is a contact irritant, or what's called an excito-repellent. It really means that the organism has to touch it first. So if there are mosquitoes around your house in the bushes, or not in the bushes yet, they're flying around. If they fly over those bushes without contacting any pesticide and go straight to the person, they can still bite. They'll still bite that person and have no ill effect. But if they land on that bush first that has been treated with that pyrethroid, and then they move to that human, they may not be able to bite that human because the pyrethroid may start taking effect, and they may not be able to fly. They may have some paralysis of their mouth parts and things where they can't function anymore. So that's a big, big difference between a 25B pesticide and a pyrethroid. And so the added benefit of 25B is true repellency, and it is a spatial repellent. So the vapors from a 25B will keep those mosquitoes completely out of the area altogether. So what with excito repellents like our general pyrethroids, they have to touch the actual skin of a person, or they have to touch that bush or that treated area, and then contact it and build up enough pesticides on their bodies that it kills them. But with essential oil-based pesticides, they're active in the vapor phase, so the mosquito doesn't even come near you. So this is the difference in using things like using different repellents on your body for ticks and mosquitoes as well. We have some of those that are pyrethroids, where the mosquito lands on is still going to land on you, probably still could bite you, but it's going to die after it does so. And then we have things more like DEET and picaridin and others that are active in the vapor phase, which kind of confuse the mosquito. They're a mixture of a confusant and a spatial repellent because they can't tell what you are. They can see you, but they can't tell what you are. They're still getting some of those cues. So they're still getting the image cue, they're still getting that visual cue, they're still getting that heat cue, but they're no longer getting the other cues that they're looking for, because their antennae and their mechanoreceptors are now jammed, and they can't detect exactly what's going on. So when adding synthetics to the tank, you want to add synthetic pesticides to the tank first. You want to add them, get them mixed into solution, and then add your 25B on top of that. And, there's some other things out there that people use. Some people will add a pyrethrin to their mosquito program if they're using bifenthrin, something to give them immediate knockdown. And that is what you're doing here. You're getting immediate knockdown, and you're also getting spatial repellency, so that the mosquitoes are not going to go in that bush. They're not going to come anywhere close to that area that you're in. And then, zone out can be mixed with IGRs as well. So if you're using Nigard, methoprene, any of those in your mixes, it can be used with those as well.
Jamel, there's some
So
other questions that have come through. Would you like
okay,
me to
I
go
can't
ahead?
I can't see the questions. They're not on they don't appear on the board.
Okay,
I
I
think you
can
had to
ask.
like copy them and post them in there the other time when we checked.
Well,
But
I'll
yeah,
just
go ahead and read them
verbally.
out.
Yep, it said, you said the ingredients are deemed to be safe. Why is the signal word danger if it is deemed safe?
So the safety of safety of a product versus testing are two different things. So there are regulations that we have to abide by when it comes to the what's on the label. So the ingredients themselves are all on EPA deemed as safe. But there are things like if it gets in your eye, then it is an eye hazard, and that's why that is on the label. And there are a lot of other 25Bs that have lower signal words that are, this is out of an abundance of caution, but it is something that to be aware of, is that you don't want to get 25Bs in your eye, because you will. I mean, a lot of them can burn your eyes and cause issues with vision. So that's why it's on there. It's kind of out of an abundance of reservation, and making sure people know that it's, these products are capable of doing some things as well.
Okay. And the next question's asking, can this be mixed with a microcapped product?
Yes, that's what I just talked
Okay.
about. So
Okay.
it can be mixed with any pyrethroid out there. And when you're doing that, sometimes you're using, the use rate for this is 1 to 3 ounces for mosquitoes, 4 to 6 ounces for fleas. But if you're using it as a spatial repellent, you would want to use the lower level. If you're using Suspend SC as your primary, and you wanted something to provide knockdown and spatial repellency, then you would go with a lower rate for adding on to that product.
Okay,
But
another question for you, if you're ready for it.
sure.
It's how well does it hold up to heavy rains before the 21 to 28 day reapplication?
So here's another, it's 25Bs are not exceptional at holding up against UV. A lot of them hold up against rain fairly well because they are oils themselves. And once these oils adhere to the leaves in it, and I'll talk about this when I talk about the application process. But when you are applying a 20 any mosquito product, you're using a backpack mister, and you're blowing and you're flipping the leaves around. And when it rains, it only rains straight down or from the side. It's not raining underneath the leaves. So where the product is getting on the underside of the leaves, it's still going to be there. So it actually, so if it's out in the grass, it's probably going to get washed out after a couple of inches of rain. But light rain is fine. Heavy downpours, there's nothing out there, no matter what any manufacturer tells you. You get 6 inches of rain, I don't care what you're using, it's gone. So that, I mean, that's excessive amounts of rain. But light rains, you're looking at, it doesn't have a huge effect on these products. And I would say, if you're gonna do things with 25B, then use them around your house. And after a heavy rain, go up to the bush you sprayed and see if you can still smell it. Because oftentimes, especially with some of the newer generation 25B products on the market, you're still going to smell it. And if you can still smell it, it's still working. So 2 weeks later, if you're going to your house and it's rained heavily and you can no longer pick it up, even if you put your nose inside the bush, then it's probably gone. But most of them do hold up pretty well.
Jamel, there's
So
one more question before you
okay.
move on, asking if it's a vapor repellent, why would you use it with a product that requires contact with the mosquito?
So good, another good question there. So the repellency factor of this is going to be, it is going to be in that 20-day period. If your service intervals are 45 days and that's how your company operates, or 30 days, or 60 days, um, then you're going to want that secondary pesticide there also. So if you're using bifenthrin and or a microcap, and that microcap is going to last 50 or 60 days, but there is a wedding um, at that location in 3 days, you're going to want to keep those mosquitoes away. Or if the mosquito pressure is really, really heavy, you're going to want to knock down the mosquitoes, knock out the mosquitoes, and keep them away, for a certain period of time. Eventually, as that 25B starts to wear off, they're going to come back, and you may have to do a reapplication of 25B if you're doing only a botanical. But if you're doing a combination of both, you still have that residual action there as well.
Very good.
All right.
I'll let you get back at it.
Okay. So Zone Out has a kind of low viscosity, water thin concentrate, so it makes it a lot easier to mix into solution. It has a kind of a cinnamon mint fragrance, and it is so in the concentrate, it's a heavier scent. In the actual work solution, it's sort of a more light scent. Some of the ones out there have very, very strong wintergreen, wintergreen, rosemary, very, very, strong essential oils. And this one doesn't contain most of those very strong smelling essential oils. So it contains multiple oil combinations with synergistic effects, and those do work to improve efficacy. So when it's mixed, according to the label, of course, also you don't have to worry too much about phytotoxicity, but you always want to be aware of phytotoxicity with any oil-based pesticide, because especially in the springtime when there's new leaves coming on trees and things like that, that's a time when you really want to pay attention to where you're putting things. And if you have oil kind of plants that are not really oil tolerant, the springtime is a time when you might want to avoid some of those plants. So these are like really thin leafed plants, like Japanese maple. That's one that you don't want to spray oil of any kind on. But those are things just to watch out for. And again, this is not to be applied to edibles. There are several different categories of 25B, and the active ingredients in here do not fall under the category that you can spray them on edible plants. So no aquatic setbacks, so you can use this at around boat docks, lake houses, even on boats if you want to. But again, a very important thing to remember with any product, not just 25B, is never bring that concentrate anywhere near the water. Because even though it's generally required or generally seen as a safer product, if you dump that in a pond, it's still going to kill every fish in that pond. So it is just how the order of pesticides is. Fish are extremely sensitive to pesticides, and so you're easily going to kill fish if you bring that concentrate. And it's not just 25B concentrate; it's anything. If you're using bifenthrin, you're using any other thing, do not take it anywhere close to a lake, river, stream, any body of water, anything like that. So Zone Out has multiple modes of action, as do most 25Bs. It has multiple neurological pathways that you're working with. And one of the things that I could point out here is that concentrated synthetic pesticides, many of them are derived from the chemicals in essential oils that have their repellency or different chemical pathways that kill insects. But so we're using a natural dose of these instead of a concentrated synthetic version of those things. So you still have multiple neurological pathways that are being affected. Some of the oils will get on the exoskeleton, and so it'll block their spiracles and cause death that way. You have some ingredients in there that will actually help to rip the waxy layer off of the outside of the insect, causing more dehydration. And then you have other things like some of these are penetrating the exoskeleton, disrupting essential functions in the insect. So we've heard for years that that 25B is octopamine blocker. That was the science at the time, but that was 15 years ago or 20 years ago when that science first came out. But we know a lot more about the ingredients in essential oils now, and some of them are tyramine octopamine blockers, so that's the equivalent of insect adrenaline, but some of them are also GABA receptor agonists, and that's what fipronil does. Some of them are acetylcholinesterase activity, so they block or cause excessive acetylcholine transmitting, and also with the nicotine receptors. And we have TRP, so transient receptor potential. So it actually just messes up with basic processes that are going on and interrupts their ability to function. So there are a lot of different things that are working for 25Bs, and it's not just keeping them away from an area. When it gets on them, it's killing them, and it's killing them through multiple mechanisms. So mixing and filling is some things to remember with mosquito products. You never want to mix or load them again near streams, wells, ponds, any waterway where there's a chance of getting contamination flowing downstream. And I should have put the video in here, but just a few days back, probably 2 weeks ago, I'm driving down the street and I see a full gallon of Bifen IT in the middle of an intersection. And somebody had set it on their truck. You could tell when they turned left, that bottle fell off in the middle of the street. And within 200 yards of that location, there was a stream. And that stream actually leads to a protected waterway area. And so I worked like crazy trying to turn around and find a way to get back to that bottle before somebody hit it, because that would have been a natural disaster on our hands. A full 1-gallon bottle of bifenthrin in a river system, a lake or river system, is a horrible thing to happen. So I did get it, and I did. It's in my garage right now. So free bottle of Bifen. So always mix and load equipment on level surfaces. You really don't want to, if you have to hold your tank between your legs to fill it, then that's probably not something good to do, because if something happens, somebody yells your name, a dog barks at you, and you drop it, that product is going all over the ground. Another thing, only mix what you need, and make sure that you're using up everything in the tank, and that you're rinsing out your tanks as well. That'll help increase the longevity of your equipment. So other things with mosquitoes, source reduction. We're really looking for areas where these mosquitoes are going to be breeding. And for the Aedes species, that's containers, and that's ephemeral water sources. That's things like you see this little dump truck with water in it. And I've seen mosquitoes breeding in a cap of a water bottle that's sitting on the ground. So yeah, they'll breed in any small source of water that they can find. So eliminating the mosquito larvae in these containers by the tip and toss method. So if it's trash, get rid of it. If it's something someone wants, tip it, rinse it out once every 24 hours, to avoid that organic matter in there attracting mosquitoes to that area. So other things with resource reduction, ponding in waters, gutters flowing and clogging. So a lot of mosquito populations can come from, clogged up gutters, or gutters that are not, they're perfectly horizontal and the water's not flowing through them. and you can get mosquitoes developing in those if they sit for 7 to 10 days or so. Establishing correct drainage, leaf litter, maintaining grasses that are overgrown, and a big thing that a lot of people could use, maybe even gain some additional income, is trimming or thinning out some of these thick bushes that these mosquitoes are using. And a lot of times you can go in and clip branches in the interior of this plant. That'll allow wind to go through, it'll allow sun to go through, and the mosquitoes will not find that habitat attractive anymore. But of course, our container breeders, we're really talking about Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti, where Aedes aegypti used to be the only mosquito you saw back in 2000, 2005. But now mostly what we see is albopictus everywhere. They're daytime biters. They have those short flights, and they fly from 200 to 500 yards, resting very, very frequently. And this is what we're using to our advantage in terms of getting rid of the mosquitoes. We're counting on them landing several times before they get to that human or pet to bite them. So they usually bite on the lower extremities, and the temperatures, we're getting into the season right now in Tennessee. Of course, we had snow 2 days ago. But we're getting into that 55 to 60 degree temperature range, that they start becoming very active. And I did see mosquitoes last week when the temperatures started hitting that critical level. And of course, with their habitat, they're staying close to humans, they're staying close to animals, because that's their source of reproduction. They need those blood meals in order to reproduce. So what do they prefer? They prefer clean to slightly organic fresh water with low salinity. So these mosquitoes can breed in sources of water that look semi-clean. But they prefer, a little bit of organic material in that water. That's why you'll see things like a bucket that's sitting outside that has very low amount of organic material in it, producing mosquitoes. But they produce a higher number of mosquitoes, and they're more attractive when they have some organic material to it. So that's why you see things, some of the traps that are out on the market have a little sachet packet that's actually grass clippings, or it's hay or something like that, to provide that organic material to attract the mosquitoes. So the water has to be still or slowly moving. So one way to get rid of mosquito larvae that continually go in certain areas is to install something that moves the water around. Either can have a solar powered station in a low spot in a yard where it automatically turns on and pumps the water out of there, or you can have an aerator in a bird bath or something that keeps getting mosquitoes in them. So they lay their black, football shaped eggs, and they don't lay them in the water. They lay them on the edge, close to, an area where if once it rains, that egg will now be underwater. So in this pot, they probably laid their eggs close to the water line, and the next time it rained, that water filled up the pot, and those eggs started becoming larvae. So the deposition occurs during the day, often in those shaded spots near host areas. So they know there's a host nearby. If they're Culex mosquitoes, there's plenty of birds. If they're Aedes species, there's plenty of mammals out there for them to feed on. So the Culex mosquitoes are the ones that are going to be in the treetops, and they're usually only biters in the late afternoon and nighttime. They don't generally come down in the day, but on shady days where there's plenty of cloud cover, they're going to be out, or the temperatures are cooler, they're going to be out and about looking for prey. Again, they do the same thing. They rest in these cool, humid areas, and they become active as the light fades, and they're really feeding on songbirds, and in agriculture, chickens and turkeys and things like that, roosting birds, pigeons. But they do have that. They rarely do bite unless they're disturbed, or either that you have that cool shaded day, or it's nighttime or late afternoon. Again, they have a high tolerance for organic pollution, so they can leave their eggs in sewage, and it's just fine. Wastewater, they love a lot of decaying vegetation, things like that. So it is very often that you see them in things like those zombie pools, where there's a pool that's been nasty, stagnant water forever. That's where you see a lot of Culex mosquitoes. You'll see 80s there too, but you'll see a lot of Culex mosquitoes. So high organic content with low dissolved oxygen are pretty common. And of course, the mosquitoes breed with a siphon tube, so that they're able to stay in that stagnant, nasty water, or either sometimes these mosquitoes are even developing in just damp soil, like really damp soil, they can still develop. So common sites for them are catch basins, stored storm drains, ditches, the edges of lakes and swamps. Again, the zombie pools, wastewater treatment plants, rice fields, irrigated fields, agricultural settings, a lot of different places that they can be. And unlike the 80s themselves, the Culex don't rely on that temporary pool. So this is also why it takes them a little bit longer to develop. Their pools of the 80s species, they reproduce a little bit faster because if it doesn't rain again, that pool that they're in is probably going to dry up, before they become an adult. So with Culex, their life cycle is a little bit longer because they're not found in those ephemeral water pools. So adulticide applications, barrier applications, shouldn't, first of all, shouldn't be confused with ULV or fogging applications. This is a barrier application around a home, and you want to be targeted and site specific. And one of the things about 25 Bs that you rarely ever hear is that you need large droplet sizes with 25 Bs in order to be effective. And even when you're doing, pyrethroid applications, 25, the droplet size being larger is actually good because it helps with getting the droplets on the underside of surfaces, helps hit those leaves and help those leaves flip around. But with the larger droplet size for the 25B, it increases the dosage to insects. So the 25Bs are dose dependent, and if you have microparticles from a ULV, or sometimes those you're gonna have to accumulate a lot of those on an insect's body to actually kill it. So the larger droplet sizes are what's necessary. And with most still backpack or still mist blowers, any mist blower that you have, if you're using a backpack, just a sprayer, to spray, you're using particles that are much bigger than 50 or 80. You're using probably 100, anywhere from 50 to 120, 150, maybe even 180 particle sizes that are coming out of the end of that blower. So you're fine with that type of equipment. This also reduces the chances of wind drift. So when you're making sure those particles are not very, very tiny, so you're not using a fogger to go out there and fog, because the smaller the particle, the further it's going to go in the wind. And the applications are made to resting and loafing areas where the mosquitoes are going to be, so deep inside of the bushes, heavy grasses, those types of areas. And so when we're looking at things like larval habitats in nature, so we see things like these, and I call this just an ephemeral pool. It's a pool that comes and it stays wet for a couple of days, maybe a week, and then it dries up again. But that's enough time for the mosquitoes to develop. So treating around areas like you see here, treating around those ditches, treating around those trees, where the tree holes are and things like that, that's going to, with 25B, the botanicals, it's going to keep the mosquitoes away from that area, because they're not going to be able to pick up on the cues that they're using. They're detecting bacteria, they're detecting smells, they're detecting odors to find that stagnant water. If you use that 25B, again, that's one great thing about it, because it will keep the mosquitoes away from that area completely. So another added benefit of adding a 25B, even if you're just doing a synthetic treatment, adding 1 ounce of zone out can give you so many additional options and value. So for our mosquitoes, our common daytime resting areas, and when you're looking at 80s, they're going to be close to homes. They're going to be in dense vegetation, underbrush, around residences. They're going to be under decks, different things like that. So they're going to be in dense vegetation. Houses, and the weird thing is that sometimes houses that don't have any trees have tons of mosquitoes. And those mosquitoes are generally coming from the neighbor's house. And when that happens, you're going to want to think about more things like insecto traps or into care or any of those. You're going to want to think about adding those to those houses, because treating houses that don't have anywhere for the mosquitoes to do that behavior of stopping going to take advantage of their behavior is going to be much more difficult to control under there. With our Culex, of course, they're going to be, this is the ones that you see in the eaves and overhangs of the house. And if you have, a screened in porch, you're going to see them up in the ceiling a lot of times, because they hang out in the tree canopies and those heavy, heavy, thick trees. And, like here in Tennessee, we don't have leaves on the trees yet. They're just now coming on the trees. So going out and doing an application right now for mosquitoes isn't going to give you, a ton of benefit, because the mosquitoes aren't landing on leaves that aren't there yet. So this is when you're, doing your evaluation and timing and getting to those sites, the heavy infested areas, when the time is right. Now you can do applications to landscaping that's already there. Sometimes there's heavy wooded bushes that are there, but there are no leaves on the trees. So the Culex mosquitoes aren't there yet. So just some things to kind of think about. When you're doing applications with, a mist blower, one thing you want to know is that you have to stand close enough to the foliage to help it penetrate. So I've seen people walking around with mosquito misters that are nowhere close to the bushes, and that a lot of times means that if you have somebody watching, your plume is going up in the air and it's blowing in the wind and going somewhere else. So stand closer to it so that those large particles hit it. And you want to use small circular motions when you're doing the application, and that helps to create a vortex. And that vortex is going to help those leaves flip around, and it's going to help drive the application deeper into foliage if you have some very, very thick foliage, especially when you have leaves that are heavy in the front and you're trying to blow past those leaves. You're doing that vortex motion is going to really help to do that. So some things to think about is with the backpack misters, especially, is don't walk backwards. Most people find themselves in trouble by walking backwards. And I've heard of more than 15 or 20 PMPs that were walking backwards with this heavy thing full of liquid and fell into a pool and had to either be saved or had to find their way out of that equipment real fast. So be very, very careful, especially around pools, and never walk backwards and you'll be okay. Walk always, look behind you and step side to side. Don't step backwards. Always walk forwards or walk to the side. Don't step backwards. So yeah, other things to watch out for when you're walking backwards. Dogs dig holes in yards. Moles are in yards. You step back on your heels with all that weight on and you're going down. So pay attention to where you're walking, and even just do a survey first to make sure that there are no, the dogs haven't dug up a bunch of holes, or there's not moles or voles or something all over the place that's doing that. When you're doing the treatment, you also want to focus on covering areas that are on all sides of the home. So this is something that you may not hear very often. It's the mosquitoes are going to come from the direction of the wind oftentimes. So if the wind switches, to a different way, or there's no wind that day, and the mosquitoes come through a different area, you want to make sure that you've got 360 degrees of coverage around the areas that the mosquitoes are going to be in. And again, you're looking for things like this. You're looking for shaded areas with dense vegetation that those mosquitoes are going to be in. And I really already mentioned this, but take a safety walk around the property and look for environmental conditions, or think about rain, think about those things that are going to affect the treatment. Identify the targeted areas and the safety hazards. So any trip hazards, make sure you get those things out of the way before you start. And again, avoid flowering plants. And one thing I really want to stress to people is that the very first plants that are available for bees and other pollinators in the early time of the season are weeds, because weeds and trees have flowers too. And so we really want to be respectful of the fact that if we're spraying a bunch of weeds, we know that there's going to be honeybees visiting those weeds. So think about that. And then using 25B is another way that you can actually apply to those plants and areas that will not affect the bees afterwards as well. So recording wind speed, accounting for wind when you're doing that, and also really thinking about chemical trespass. Now, this is something that's fairly new now, and this is the odors and scents from things that are going wafting from one house to another. So just something to be aware of, that this exists and chemical trespass is out there, and look up more information on that. And this is, our thank you for that. And I did have a slide of my contact information, but I will put this back up here. We'll put the first slide back up here. It's for my contact information. And I'll take any more questions right now. We have a little bit of time left. We've already fielded a lot of the questions, so I'm happy to answer them in the next 5 minutes or so we have.
Jamel, thanks for presenting such great informative information. And we do have a couple of questions that we weren't able to get to earlier. And this next one's asking, has it been tested against hematophagus flies? I think I said that correctly.
So this product has this very limited label as in terms of in terms of species, in terms of organisms. The label only allows for mosquitoes and fleas right now, so it's not for other flies and things like that right now. It is very specific for those two things.
Okay,
So it's meant more for mosquito vector management, so mosquito management, flea management, things like that.
gotcha. Another question is asking, would it be too much to mix a product like Demand and IGR and Zone Out all at once?
It's not. I mean, because there are products that already have synthetics and IGRs in them. I mean, I think OneGuard's one of those, and there are a few others out there that have IGRs built into them. So adding, 1 ounce of Zone Out on top of that to provide some additional initial knockdown as well as repellency is not going to be, too much of anything. And it's something that's pretty commonly done. Um, for those who have done 25B work, and like I said, I did 25B work 25 years ago, doing 25B back when there was IC2. Anybody remember that? It's IC3, and it's been that for years. But back when they were just coming out, and we had some of the very first liquid concentrates out there, I was using them, and I was mixing them with things like Demand CS or things like Bifin or other things in some circumstances where the mosquito pressure was intense. Usually, if it was just, but my business also focused on more natural treatments and things, so that's what I did. And so, if you're looking for adding that repellency, adding that, so the mosquitoes can't find, some of the areas that they're reproducing in, so they can't find males, and males can't find females because their antennae are not working correctly, because those vapors are actually interrupting critical processes that they can't find the females. They don't know where they are. So those are all things that are added benefits of 25B that you really don't get, because I know there are people out there who do a mosquito treatment, and the next day you have people calling you going, your mosquito treatment didn't work, it's not repelling anything. And that's because, again, that slide that I showed earlier with the excito repellency, because the products that we use commonly are not repellents. They're excito-repellents. Insects have to touch them first. So if you have, and I can tell you the best circumstance for some of these products is if you have a house that always gets mosquitoes and those people are still getting bitten all the time, add a 25B and you thank me later, because it is an added benefit of adding that spatial repellent, so that there are some people that are more attractive to mosquitoes than other. I'm one of them. I stick my arm outside the door and mosquitoes start flying in. So really disrupting that neurological pathways, those neurological systems that are detecting the odors and every those things, that's an added benefit. And that's what a spatial repellent does for you. Whereas, if you're just using something like Bifin and you're not using anything else, that's why people are still getting bitten by mosquitoes, because the mosquitoes can either bypass the treatment completely and land right on the person, or they can still plant hop but not accumulate enough of that pesticide to actually kill them fast enough before that person has already been bitten. So that's a real benefit of 25B. And there are 25B granules out there, there are liquids, there are all kinds of things. But again, you have to remember that they have a shorter lifespan, but that shorter lifespan is on purpose, because that is why that category is allowed to exist, because it does not stay in the environment. It breaks down, over time.
Jamel, we are at the top of the hour, but we just have two more questions, so let's go ahead and take those. This next one's asking, how well would it hold up to 90 to 110 degree temperatures?
So again, this is one of those things where I can ask you that same question for any pesticide. They No pesticide is very resilient to temperatures that high. And 25Bs are volatile oils. So the hotter it is, the faster they're going to flash off. Now, there are ingredients in here to help this last a little bit longer under those conditions. But, when you get direct sunlight in 110 degrees, those oils are going to volatilize. So we're still conducting testing on longevity for, in extreme environments. And the other thing I can tell you is this product has actually been in use for over a year. It was in use by a large mosquito company, and this is just being released to a lot of other companies out there now. So yeah, it's been in use, it's been in the field, it's proven itself already. So we are, in those secondary phases.
All right, and then our last question is asking, using standalone on a 21-day rotation, how well does it work, or should we always be adding additional pesticides?
No, so if you're doing 21, 28-day cycles, which is pretty common now for most people using 25B mosquito products, you can use this product alone. You don't have to have anything else. But you are looking at the other things with mosquito treatment. So you're looking at larviciding. You still have to do all those things. You can't just go spray and pray it away. You have to make sure that you're evaluating the property, looking for places that the larvae can reproduce, looking for the larvae, using larvicides, doing the tip and tossing anything, making sure that there's no low spots that they can breed in. Because one of the problems you have with a lot of mosquitoes is that there's a low spot in the yard that they're breeding in, and there's nowhere around there for those mosquitoes to go into bushes or land on anything. Those people are going to get eaten alive, because there's the only areas that are protected generally are going to be the house or the deck or shaded spots around that house. So you'll see, even 80s Egypti and other 80s species, they'll be on the outside of the walls of the house in the cool shaded areas, because there's nowhere else where there's shade. So yeah, just something to think about. But yes, you can 100% utilize the product alone.
Well, great. I'm happy to report we were able to get through all of the questions today. With that, I want to thank you for attending today's webinar. Later today, you will receive a follow-up email with a short survey and the recording of today's session, and we would appreciate you sharing your feedback with us. So on behalf of our speaker and Veseris, we sincerely thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.